we have resources galore. So this slide really just highlights what I am putting in the chat here, but we have multiple things available to you. We want to remind you of that exist and how to use them as well. That first guide, the process guide, was something that we worked with Dr. Moore with, and really bringing us back to our why. So if you are in a place of working with your team, new team members, maybe explaining this process for the very first or first times, this is a great place to start with a discussion of mission, vision, values, all the way through resourcing, teaming. And we keep coming back to assets, needs, and resources, which is also the theme of today. Christina will walk us through. But what this document does do is help you have those discussions, help you work through questions to get you to a place where you are ready to tackle that template. So this is a wonderful process guide. We, again, encourage a lot of discussion in and around that with your team members. This is a great place to start. The second document, and so again, we're not going to necessarily open them, but you have them in the chat. The second one is actually, as you know, we have received back in November the actual template that is being asked of us to submit come May. So we just want to remind you, this is the link. You have it here. But as you go through, you'll notice the materials that we're putting together for our COP, as well as with the planning documents and action plans, will help you get to submission. And so the template is there. This is the document that you will be submitting. I know folks had some questions as to which one we do need to turn back in, and it is this CBH template. So that's the second one on the screen there. I want to pass it quickly over to Christina, who developed an action plan too. In the last session, we were able to kind of walk through it, work together. But this is one that you can actually take and pull from, start plugging into this beautiful grid. And so I will pass it to Christina if you want to touch on your action plan.
Thanks, Tina. This is just a reminder. So this action plan is an optional tool for everyone to use, and it really helps to draw the through line between the wonderful process guide that was created for this work, in addition to the preliminary plan template. So this outlines the focus areas of the process guide, along with the phases that the preliminary plan template is outlined in, and some suggested activities that align to the phases and focus areas, and an opportunity for you to put the who, the evidence of the work that you're doing, and prioritize as you move along in this process. And I did want to highlight the second tab of this action plan resource specifically, and that is the resources tab. So many of the resources that we have highlighted throughout our time together that are also posted on the hub, our best practice guides, a lot of the templates and resources for mapping, needs and assessment mapping, intervention inventorying are all linked on that resource tab there for you. And I did want to highlight a newly released resource, our best practices in universal screening for social, emotional, and behavioral outcomes. So this is an implementation guide, which is an updated version of a previously released implementation guide. This is gold. I had the opportunity to read through this over the weekend, and it hits all of the key points that will help you as you're creating your preliminary plan for universal screening. And that is also linked there to the resources tab on the action plan. So check that out when you have an opportunity.
Thanks, Christina. So what I want to share, just to kind of give folks context, we are so appreciative of Dr. Boying Fan, who actually in the last session stayed with us throughout the coaching session and answered quite a bit of questions. And in between that time as well, we've been able to receive more answers to your questions. And so just to let you know, we'll review these in just a moment, but what you have on your screen are questions that you all submitted. Everything from, we're doing a collective narrative to just how does the quarterly progress report look? And so those have been made available, and we'll put that in the chat as well. But I'd love to welcome Dr. Boying Fan too, to give us a little bit more, or if you could spend some time in sharing with us a little bit more about the answers and maybe even examples of what it is, that would bring these answers to life. So a little bit more about the answers. So universal screening FAQs are in the chat. And we welcome Dr. Boying Fan.
Well, thank you, Tina. And thank you for putting up the resources out, Christina. I really appreciate the documents you shared. And I can already tell it's probably going to be very helpful for everyone to take a look and get more additional information. As Tina described, this FQ is a list of questions that were generated last session, and we provided some preliminary responses. And hopefully that gives you some initial ideas about how you should approach the universal screening preliminary plan template. Again, at this moment, I think it's best if our grantees ask me questions directly. At the moment, I do not have a live example of additional responses, but I would appreciate more discussions from our grantees about specifically what you have in your mind. There's one thing that I was thinking about, which is question 5, that was not addressed last session, but I wanted to give you guys a preliminary thought I have. Right now, we're not considering taking revisions to the progress report, but I will recommend that for your purposes and for our tracking purposes, it would be most effective if you describe your progress in relates to the goals and plans you propose in your proposal. So specific activities that are unique to universal screening, not to other BHSSA grants, would be extremely helpful for us to kind of get a better understanding of where you are and for you to better track where you are in this particular project. With that being said, I am happy to answer any additional questions about the questions or new questions that you may have.
And we will take down the slides in just a moment. If you are looking for answers to these questions, please go ahead and check out the document in the chat. But again, as Dr. Boyan shared, please share your questions with us. What is it that you'd like to know? Any extension, or if you haven't had a chance to review, what do you want to know about what's on the screen, what's coming up with your quarterly report?
I should also note that I will be updating this document if there's additional questions coming up, and I will share with all grantees, so we all have a written record of our recommendations. And things that were already on this, I should remind everyone that we are thinking about making changes to the preliminary plan template, as you noted, for parallel planning efforts. So there will be minor adjustments, and when time is ready, we'll share it as soon as we can, as well as with the scoring process. So our team is engaging early discussions of this.
And of course, we will welcome Dr. Pham back in the peer coaching towards the end. It is optional, but again, that might be another space for you to ask if something comes up as we continue throughout the session. All right, we'll keep checking that chat. Thank you again. Thank you, Dr. Pham. Always appreciate you being so responsive to us. And we will continue through our session, but thank you. We are ready to move into new learning right after a quick review for those who missed maybe the first sessions. Won't go through too many of these, but what we did talk about, and as I mentioned, sessions do follow or support you in your work through the action plan, through the process guide, and through the actual template you'll be submitting. But what we talked a lot about in the first session was about teaming, and across the board, what can folks do depending if they are on an implementation team or if they're actually maybe only part of the planning team or both, right? And across county, district, and school teams, what does that look like in their day-to-day as far as roles and responsibilities? On the next slide, we talk a little bit more about team composition, and we talked externally about who it is that could be a part of or could contribute their voice to your work. And so many of you mentioned, you actually listed those partners that are a part of it, not only in our education world, but also justice and systems involved, professionals who maybe are giving voice or come to the meetings or who have been invited, your public and behavioral health and human services. And so you named all of those folks again who are at your table or who continue to, or we're going to hear a little bit later about the impact of having such strong relationships and partnerships with folks like county behavioral health. So We talked a little bit about cross system, and then of course the different levels between school, district, and county. Again, that kept coming up, that there's a space for everybody, and there has to be communication. And so whether it's going from advisory to, again, the implementation piece, to include all and to have that plan as far as how they will be part of your team. With mapping assets, needs, and resources. So excited to bring Christina, who has put together a wonderful presentation on really looking at and assessing your assets and needs and what to do with them. Not to stop there, but to simply keep going forward with mapping out those resources so that you can best support your plans. So with that, pass it on to Christina.
Thank you, Tina. All right. So as we know, and true of any grant, so doing a needs and asset assessment and resource map of some kind is typically an ask, and it is a required portion of this grant as well. But I wanted to really unpack, what does this mean? So what is needs assessment, asset assessment, and the difference between resource mapping, and how does this directly apply to universal screening? We might have done this before on other projects that we're a part of, but what does this actually mean for the readiness that is aligned to our universal screening work, both at the community level and at the school site, district, and student level? So we're going to unpack this a little bit. So thinking about needs assessments, we're really thinking about the challenges that we might encounter, both in terms of implementing a universal screener in our school communities, and also the types of data and needs that we might acquire through the results of that screener that we implement. So what type of student needs might we anticipate? We're also thinking about assets. A full picture of complete mental health has both to do with the deficits that we might identify, but also the strengths and the assets that exist within our school communities and within the students themselves. So we cannot ignore the asset piece, and we need to think about how are we assessing the strengths of our community, the strengths of our students, and the systems level strengths that exist within our school communities that will help to bolster mental health and also lean into a supportive system around universal mental health screening. And then finally, resource mapping. I think of this more as the logistical pieces of what are we going to do? How are we going to respond once we identify needs through our universal screening process? Are our systems ready to respond to the needs that we've identified? So we're going to look at some detailed examples of this a little bit. And oftentimes when we're thinking about needs, asset, and resource mapping, we have to think to the types of data that we're going to examine to truly understand and complete a thorough assessment. So wherever you are in your journey, be thinking about what types of data have I already started to gather. Maybe do I need to broaden my lens of the types of data I'm examining to ensure that I have a full scope picture and I'm ready to move forward with universal screening? So typically we are very skilled at looking at traditional district level data through our LCAPs, our SIPSAs, our California School Dashboard measures. We look at grades, we look at discipline, we look at attendance on a regular basis. This is something that we're very fluent in. And of course, this does tell us a lot of good information about our school communities and our community at large. However, when we think about universal screening and the social, emotional, and behavioral needs of our students and our families, we need to look beyond that. We need to think about expanded types of data measures. For example, we're thinking about our school climate surveys. If you do the California Healthy Kids survey, that's a great piece of data to lean into. We're thinking about empathy interviews, focus groups, as we're beginning to start this work. We're also thinking about things like possibly tracking our nurse's office visits, our counseling referrals, our wait lists for mental health resources within our community. And then finally, our broader level, community level data. So what is the context of our community? What have we been experiencing within our communities? Have we been recently ravaged by wildfires? Are there high levels of domestic violence within our community? I was recently working with a school district in Yolo County, actually. Najwa, you'll be familiar with whom I'm talking about, but we examined their city level data and found that there were high rates of binge drinking in the community, in the adults, as well as high rates of domestic violence. And so the school team came together to think about, what does this mean for the interventions that we put in place on our school campuses and at what tier. So if we're seeing this across the board at high levels, what types of tier 1 preventative trauma-informed practices do we need to ensure we have in place at the tier 1 level? And thinking from a universal screening lens, we might anticipate that when we implement that universal screener, we might see a high level of response of, I've experienced a traumatic event, or I've experienced violence in my home. So wanting you to think about the types of data that you might collect and broadening that lens. So why is this important? So completing a needs asset and resource mapping assessment is all about readiness. This is to ensure that we are ready from the systems level to implement a universal screener, and that we also have taken strong consideration into the context of our community and our school sites. So even from school site to school site, as we're collecting this data, we might see that one school site might not have the system level readiness that another school site has. Does that mean we won't implement that screener in that school site? No, but it means that we might need to do some work to create that readiness to ensure that this is going to be a smooth process. And we might select a different school site to pilot and serve as that first launch of our universal screener. It also gives us information on what type of screener are we going to select. So depending on what the needs and assets of our community are, that might tell us, okay, I'm going to screen for this type of information versus this type of information. If we have very strong tier 1 PBIS implementing schools, we have strong SEL curriculum happening on our campuses, we clearly value mental health, then we might make some different decisions about what type of information we're screening for versus going for a tier 1 type of SEL skills-based screener. This also gives us great information about capacity. So our system level readiness at the district and the school site level. Do we have the people with the time and with the systems in place? Are we accustomed to looking at data together as a team to then make decisions about what interventions we're going to put in place? And then finally, like we'll talk about in a minute, what interventions do we have available, both at the school level and within our community, to then support and respond to the needs that we identify through screening? So you'll see there at the bottom of the slide that universal screening is the most effective, ethical, and equitable when schools are prepared to act on the data. So we want to make sure that we are being responsible in our screening efforts and have done a thorough job of assessing our readiness and our systems and logistics to support screening. These slides have more information on them, more words than I would typically put on slides, but I do this because I want this to be a resource for you to take with you. So when you're thinking about your needs assessment, if you haven't thought about these types of data, this would be a great piece to bring back to your team and to talk about at the school site and the district level as well. So some example activities aligned to needs assessments. So really when we're thinking about needs, we're looking for those patterns. What can we expect to see through our screening efforts? So we're looking at things like our community again. So what types of things have our community been experiencing? What are the needs that are arising when we look at the community level? We're thinking about things like our discipline policies. So are the policies that exist on our school campuses contributing to mental distress? Are those things that we need to look at before we implement a screener? You might also be, I talked about before, about wait lists. So do we have the staffing capacity? Or we have only a few people that can serve the mental health and behavioral needs of our students on our campuses or in our community? Those are all examples of needs and then examples of data sources that you can look to give you the answers to those questions. And then thinking about assets. So how do we identify those strengths in our communities and our students and at our school sites? So then some things to look at is think about your family engagement. So what does family engagement and communication look like right now? Because when we're thinking about something like universal screening, we want to make sure that that communication flow is there. If we are identifying student needs, what does that communication then look like with the family? And being able to talk about mental health and behavioral health with our families. Is this something that has been normalized? And maybe it is. And that is a huge strength and asset as you prepare to launch a universal screener. Also thinking about things that already exist. So our LCAPs and our SIPSAs, what types of documents tell us that mental and behavioral health are highly valued by our school communities already? Are these key goals in your school communities that you can lean into and make that clear through line and alignment on in your universal screening efforts? We also want to think about the teams and systems that might already exist. So if you have COST teams on your school campuses, PBIS teams that are already fluid, well-functioning, they're used to looking at data together as a team and can respond to needs. Those are all example of assets and some data sources that you can look to there. And then resource mapping. This is my favorite part. This tends to be a little bit more technical, but very, very important piece. You need to map out all of the interventions that exist in your community and on your school sites to know that we can be responsive to the needs. And this will also help you understand what type of tools to select, right? And we want to be very careful and thoughtful when we're looking at different screening tools. What types of information are we going to gather? And then think about now, what am I going to do with that? Do I have the available interventions to support the needs that I might be identifying through screening? Do I have clear referral or request for assistance pathways established on my school campuses? So if we identify needs through screening, what is that next step? Is there a request for assistance that the school site fills out that then goes to a team and that they are fluid in matching to interventions? Do I have a through line to my community members if I need to reach out to the community to connect to services because they are not available on school campuses? So these are all things that can be mapped out by completing intervention inventories and community resource maps. And there are examples of those types of templates on the action plan on that second tab on the resource tab. But please reach out if you'd like more examples of those. We have plenty and I'm happy to share more. So I hope that that was a quick and helpful overview of breaking down the difference between needs assessment, asset assessment, and resource mapping, and to help you think about, if I don't clearly have this information, how could I go back and what types of data sources can I look to? And with that, I am very pleased because I get to hand it over for our grantee spotlight today, Santa Clara County. So we hope to do this moving forward in a lot of our COPs, is to highlight grantees that are doing the work and hear your story. What are you doing around universal screening? What have been your strengths, your challenges along the way? So Pilar is here with us today to share Santa Clara County Office of Education's journey thus far.
Thank you so very much, Christina, and the rest of the STAC team. Nice to see you, Boying. So when I was invited to do this, I chuckled a little bit and was like, I don't know if I have all the answers. So if you're good with me sharing where we are, absolutely. My teammate is here. Stacy is somewhere on this call as well. So she could chime in at any time. But really what I want to do is I want to share a little bit about Santa Clara, who we are, and also how myself and my team have been navigating really what this means to lift universal, mental health screeners in schools, and being super intentional about what it means with our relationships, right? And so let me just share a little bit, is like the phase one of my conversation with y'all. Phase one is, let's talk a little bit about Santa Clara County. We have 32 districts in our county. We have 92 charter schools and an estimated 231 students that we really have the privilege of serving on all kinds of capacities at the county office. My department is the Youth Health and Wellness Department, and this department was established on the heels of COVID in 2021. In my branch, we have in my department, we have 4 branches. We have community schools. We're RTAC for the Bay Area. We have the wellness programs branch, and I'll talk a little bit about that because that's where this work is somewhat nested in. We have school health systems and billing, and so leading some work around billing in the county and in the state. And we also have strategic initiatives. And the strategic initiatives branch is in partnership with Sacramento County Office of Education. And we're co-leading this work around capacity grants. And I'm sure everybody here is very well aware of. If not, my team is not here, but I might be able to answer some questions around that. We're currently partnering with about 5 community-based organizations, and that's changed quite a bit since 2021. We had probably about 15, and up until about last year, as some of our grants start to sunset, namely like SB HIP, some of you are familiar with that, we started to have to transition and start saying, okay, where is our capacity internally, and what is that going to look like? So there's that. We operate 17 wellness centers throughout Santa Clara County in 10 different districts. And really what that means is we fully staff these wellness centers using our grant dollars. We're 100% grant funded. So we do not receive a dime from general funds. We do not receive any supplemental kind of dollars. We're 100% grant funded, and our TAC and our strategic initiatives, our capacity grant, our contracts that we have, very, very separate. But other than that, we're grant funded. And so we white knuckle it literally every year because we don't know, there's so many implications.
Pilar, I believe you're muted. If you can unmute, thank you.
Do you hear anything I said? Or was I just going, oh, okay. All right. And so and I share that because as the grants have been sunsetting and billing not happening as quickly as I think anticipated back, 2 years ago, and then we started billing back in December of 2024, we're recognizing that it isn't necessarily going to be be able to fully supplement exactly what we've pushed out there with these beautiful grants that we've been privy to have. And we staff those wellness centers with mental health specialists, and those are namely social workers, licensed marriage family therapists, and wellness liaisons, also known as like wellness coaches. That's not the name of our position, but they serve in that similar type of capacity. One of our biggest partners, and this work that we're able to do here is not possible without them. I sing their praises all the time. I don't know if they're here or not, but that's our work with County of Santa Clara Behavioral Health Department. We had the BHSSA round 3 grant with them, and that was able to provide a lot of resources and supports to our schools. We continue to fund some of these positions that I just mentioned in our wellness centers through those dollars that we have until 2027. And so when this grant became available, of course, we're like, how can we make this work? And most importantly, how do we become strategic? So it's not another something that we're doing, and then when the funds go, there go this great idea of having universal screening, but we actually make it accessible to the districts. I'm a former assistant superintendent as well as a former high school principal. And the one thing I could say with full compassion and empathy, as well as also frustration, is there's a lot of great ideas that come up, and then we're limited with the personnel that can actually do it from start to finish, right? Or help lead the initiative, because you know that your very best leaders do 5 million jobs, and they do so very graciously, and then they end up getting a better paying job somewhere else, and so you lose them. So part of what we were thinking when we applied for this grant was exactly that. All right, so we know we're going to do this, highly possibility that we're going to get some funds, but really, what does it mean for our own internal capacity, knowing that we're doing a lot of big work that's never been done before. So we're learning it as we go. And we don't want to burn our people out either, right? I need them to lead well. It's the motto that we have. Like, we need to lead well as that means in every sense of the terms. And so I hope that's a little bit of framing to just let you know who we are. And also the assets of those branches that are housed in this amazing department that I get to lead with some really fearless and amazing leaders who are courageous and are willing to have the difficult conversations in sometimes the most sometimes some of the places that they want to hear the difficulties. So I'm glad that we could talk a little bit about some difficulties, as well as it's pushing our thinking around what it means to truly partner and provide. If we're saying we stand for youth mental health equity, what does that really look like and feel like and sound like within the scope of work that I get to influence and lead in Santa Clara? So one of the very first things Stacy and I did was we started to talk about the districts. Like I mentioned, we have 10 districts that we partner with, and we did our own little tier 1, 2, 3, which are the districts that have really high needs, our tier 3 districts. High needs, but maybe not many high resources or the personnel that could help collaborate with us. And who's like the second, and then who's, maybe one of the tier 1s that great to partner with, but maybe those needs aren't very, very much there at this point. This is all happening, also pre what we're seeing in the country with some escalating needs around deportation and the fear and the trauma that's ensuing with that. And we are also noticing that the enrollment is dropping dramatically with a lot of our students who may speak another language. We're not going to even make an assumption that they're documented or not documented. And also we're seeing this growing need of we don't know what to do. So who then better to partner with, but some of those districts that might have these really great needs where a lot of our students might be silenced because they don't know how to seek help. They don't want to bring attention to themselves, right? And so that started to shift a little bit, and we started to engage in conversation. So it started really with Stacy and I'm just taking a little bit through our thought process, if this could be of any help to any of you all. Tiered our districts with those needs, like I mentioned. Then the next step was really looking at who currently is receiving some resources and supports already within our department. I'm not even talking about out in the county because there's so many different programs, but just like who's a community school, who has community schools, who is currently, tapping into the capacity grant. Let's look at their implementation plan. Because remember, I told you we lead this work, so I could look at their implementation plan right away. What are we noticing in the LCAP? Who has, there's, the reputation of who's really focused on youth mental health and really wants to do something, and who's saying it, but really hasn't allocated the resources and supports to do that as, to a deeper level. And so, and who's also in the process of participating in our billing consortium. We have a billing consortium that we're starting with in Santa Clara County, where my billing team will be doing the billing, providing the technical assistance and the training, and then also doing the billing on behalf of some of these districts who are also receiving capacity grant dollars. So a lot of it was just strategizing. Now, I'm making this sound super simple and easy, and it is because I have an amazing team who's really, really organized. And then and I have my one-on-ones with them weekly, and they're like, hey, this is what you need to know. Is, I say, what do I need to do? And this is what I need you to do, right? Communicate with me, because when these opportunities come up, we're able to share. It really became, how do we strategize and leverage maybe a district that has some additional, we at least know some additional funding resources that we might be able to complement, as well as where we have some staff, as well as where we have a good relationship. None of this is possible without relationships. And I spend quite a bit of time in nurturing our relationships. Relationships are huge. It's the secret sauce of when we were teachers. If anybody here's a teacher, when we were teachers, right? You could get all kinds of kids to do stuff if you have a good relationship with them. They don't even know it. I'm like, you're writing a paper and you don't even know you're writing this paper because we made it magical, right? So I sort of take that same approach when it comes to our partnerships. Like, they probably won't even really know so much of, because we're going to make it as easy as we can, and we're going to be transparent, and I'm going to be upfront. This is what I need, but this is how I can help you in that process. And that's literally what happened. I'd be more than happy to share the intro email that I sent out. Once we identified the districts, we sent out an email, and I was upfront. We are really, grateful to say that we got this great grant opportunity. I just did this. This is not something I did when we became recipients of the grant back back in the fall, I spent some time, number one, being an STAC, participating here to really see what is the lift, what's the ask, because I also, the one thing I won't do to anyone, because I hated when it was done to me in the leadership roles at the schools, was do something sloppy, right? We're not going to be sloppy. It's not going to be easy, but we're not going to be sloppy. And it's the hottest commodity that we don't have enough of, right? And I get school, this is like one of the 50 million things that they're grappling with. So I really wanted to feel fully comfortable with at least how I'm going to start, who are going to be some of the partners that I'm going to reach out to. And so we reached out to an elementary district because we wanted to work with, part of our plan is to administer the universal screener to a 3rd and 6th grade. And then 9th grade is an important grade for me. It's also where I've done a lot of my research around 9th grade on track and what beautiful things you could get in front of some of our young people's needs in 9th grade. Let's pay attention to those students and what we did for them, and let's see what their graduation rate is like. There's so much you could still do with that in districts that are focused on that. I was like, that's what I'm going to also connect. I get what we're doing for the purpose of, we're doing this implementation plan, this roadmap, but there's so much more you can do with it. And my job is to help them see that if they're open to it, right? And so I spent a lot of time thinking about what that could mean and what that could look like. I sent out an email to 2 different districts, actually, and one in elementary, who we have community schools with, another one, a K-12, particularly for the high school, who, and they're going to be participating in the billing consortium. So I was like, this will be good because we're also going to start thinking about what does the billing look like for these screeners, right? So I have my billing team figuring that all out and how they'll manage that. I'm not there to figure that out, but this is strategy, right? Elementary district was very open to it right away. That email was pretty clear. I'm looking at 1 hour a month from now until the end of the school year. We'll have our micro team meeting, and I'll talk a little bit about what that looks like. And then we will open it up to others come February, March, April, up until like May or June, depending on when their school year ends. We'll meet again in August. That might be a little bit of a longer meeting. And then in September, and then I'm hoping to launch between September and October. And so that was very clear. That's my plan, unless something major happens. That's sort of what I'm anticipating. I put together, so I invited them with that email, and then they said, yep, I want to learn some more. I then had a one-on-one meeting with them. Once they said they were interested, I said, great. Then I'll send out a launch meeting. It'll just be a micro team. I'm not saying to invite your counselors. I want us to let's talk about what communication is going to look like and meeting cadence. Does every 3rd Thursday work for you? I will make, it's 5 o'clock or, 2 o'clock. We'll make that work. So I wanted that meeting to be with my point person at the district. And so Stacey and I met with the elementary, who was on board relatively quickly. The K-12 one said that, they needed to think about it because they said, we don't know the capacity of our people right now, and we don't know if we want to add that on. And I said, please have that figured out. And if this doesn't work out for you, it's fine. We will share our learnings with you anyway. You're one of our, you're a great partner, and we want to share. It's important to share that with them. And so they got back to us probably within a week and said, yeah, we can't do it. We said, not a problem. I had another district in mind, a secondary district, so just a high school district in Santa Clara. I reached out to them immediately, sent that same email because I do not have time to be writing new fancy emails. So I will give it all to you guys. You could use it. Sent that email out. We scheduled a meeting within a week, and within literally that same day, she's like, yep, we want to do it. Will you be able to help us? This was their only, it was their only ask. Will you be able to help us with staffing, because we weren't sure if we were going to be able to keep this one staff member that we have there? And I said, sure, we'll make it work. That. Absolutely. But that means also that we're going to really need to figure out how we're going to make this work. It's a huge high school, right? It's a lot of 9th graders. We're looking at a lot of 9th graders. And so we worked it out. So they're super excited. And I said, and I knew that they had applied for the community schools grant. And so this ties into what like Christina was saying, just about like, what are their resources? And I already had the other elementary as a community school. So I already have at least their asset maps, their needs assessments from 2 years ago, which they need to update anyway for their community schools annual grant application, their annual progress report. So I know that much. And we stay pretty much in lock and key. We collect a lot of the data for the wellness centers anyway. So we'll be updating that. And then with this new district who was like, yep, we want to do it. Like, we need to do it. I think it's great. I made all these connections to ninth grade success as well as graduation rate. They then turned around and sent me their community schools application. They are not recipients of it, but they had to do all their needs assessment and all that other stuff to apply. And so we've already worked out who that group is going to be. I made this sound like super easy and simple, and it's hard to get on people's calendars, right? It's hard to sometimes when you sit with it, you're like, but I have the agendas and I shared it with the team and we could put it on the hub. I've had intro email, intro meeting, launch meeting with our micro team. And then we have our second meeting where I shared the agenda draft with you all for our next meeting. The biggest thing that I needed to convey to them is, number one, I'm not going to spring on them anything last minute. I will work around their schedule. Their relationship matters to me more than anything else in this world. And I think they know that. I spend quite a bit of time wanting to nurturing that relationship, as does Stacy and the rest of our team. I had an experience when I was an assistant soup, and I was very transparent with all of them, where we did a survey. I think it was like a panorama survey, or I can't remember the name of the survey, but it was like a survey screener. I thought we had truly vetted it with staff and with families. And in my mind, I was like, yeah, we're ready to go. Like, we got this. And it went sideways 50 different ways. And the community was up in arms, and parents like, what's going to happen with this data? And oh my gosh. And teachers like, I don't feel comfortable. And for as much as we thought we were ready, we weren't as ready as we could have been, because we didn't have a roadmap. Thank you, Boeing. We didn't have a roadmap to know about this, but we also really didn't realize some of the resistance that was going to be out there. Because in our mind, we're like, this is the best idea in the whole wide world. And we didn't at that point have anybody telling us, well, no, it's not. And this is why. And so that has stayed with me. That's why I'm very involved in this, because of that experience. I don't want that to happen to anyone, because in the end, there are things that we weren't able to do. And the ones who are most impacted are the young people who really need the services and the supports the most. And it's our job to get out of the way and make sure that we do everything that we can to ensure they have what they need so they could hopefully one day sit in our seats. So in short, that's sort of like our story and where we are. We're still in the planning process. We're still in we recognize time. We all know springtime is the busiest time in education. You're in 2 years, right? You're closing out 1 year, you're planning the second year, and assessments and everything else that is happening happens from reports and all of that. So I like to just offer to all of you that you don't have to do it alone. I'm a Virgo, and so I just like to plan. It's like in my astrological sign. And so I just like to plan, to have it, even if it goes sideways, like, right, if I end up not using that plan, I like to just have things readily accessible. So I'd be more than happy to share that. That's the teacher spirit in me. And so I'm available if anybody has any questions about our journey thus far. It's definitely a journey. And I think that's all I have for you today.
Wonderful, Pilar. I know you shared with us some samples of agendas, and I put those in the chat. I wondered if you wanted to kind of touch on those as well.
Sure. Let me see. Stacy can also, yeah. Stacy. Oh, yeah, Stacy, I forgot to mention that. She did it. Thanks, Stacy. We actually we were meeting with county behavioral health in all of these, right? We did pre-planning sessions. And so because they also have different partnerships with them, SLS, they have different relationships with the districts that we sometimes might not know about. So I'm just sharing that too. Yes, like we definitely leverage that partnership. All right, so let me open up I could talk a little bit about the agendas here. So this was the first agenda, the initial planning meeting with the team, not like the intro meeting. This was the one that we scheduled once they had agreed, yes, we want to be a part of it. I utilized the resources from the actually what STAC has shared, what Leora and Tina and Christina have shared with us, the guide book, if you will. I plucked out some things that I felt could work in this first initial meeting with this micro team. And the micro team is inclusive of myself, Stacy, County Behavioral Health. I invite them to the meetings. They don't have to go, but they do go. And the district director and maybe their other person that would be working with them. So for the most part, it was the director and then of like student services and then maybe the clinical director. And so I utilized literally that guide to help map it out along with some of the other things that I knew some of the districts had that we could use as resources to facilitate this meeting. My biggest thing is organization. If our logistics aren't really clear is kind. Would have channeled Brene Brown for that. So let's just be really clear on when we can meet, what you could expect anywhere from an hour and 15 minutes. If we can't figure out what we need to do in an hour and 15 minutes once a month, then I'm going to, if there's things that are left maybe unsaid, undone, then I will follow up with an email and then we'll do that again, because time is so of the essence and so scarce. And then I utilized the resources from here and I shared it with them. I talked a little bit about like why a universal mental health screener, as well as what does it just mean for overall student success? And so that's pretty much what you see here, roles, responsibilities, and then the second agenda, which is the meeting we'll be having this month, is just like a draft, but it's closing the loop on some of the things from our first meeting, as well as what they could expect coming up. I don't anticipate going like deeply into screeners probably until March. Because so much of it is like, how do we plan to do that? And then we could discuss screeners. And there's a lot of, I'm not clinical. I'm not a clinician. That's not my background. And so I open that space for the clinicians to be able to speak to that. And so County Behavioral Health is a part of that, as well as Stacy, and then the clinical team at the school district participates in that, as well as our staff. Our staff who are supporting the wellness centers will be part of these meetings. And students is important. Student voice is super important for me. So they're working on some of those things, getting some students that could be involved. Myself and Tanya Calabretta, who is part of the strategic initiatives branch that I have, we lead SWAG. It's Student Wellness Advisory Group in Santa Clara County. So we have about 30 high school students throughout the county and different schools throughout the county that we meet up biweekly, and really we're adult allies. We hold a space for them and we talk about mental health and they have different projects that they're working on. And so I let them know about this as well. And so they will also be sharing some insight and input into what does a screener mean, and really what is it that we need to think about as adults that we don't necessarily think about, and we forget to ask those who are recipients of what we do out there. So I don't know if anybody has any questions about the agendas or anything that I've just shared, but I'm here.
And with that, we'll just end with all of us bring light to exciting solutions never tried before. For it is our hope that implores us at our uncompromising core to keep rising up for an earth more than worth fighting for. For the material, for the time we spent today and the purpose we're brought together, and for the world that we are in today, our hope is that something today resonated with you, stays with you, and keeps us moving forward. So thank you for the time that we've spent. Thank you for hanging on for a little bit longer. And again, if you have any questions, you know to reach us. Hub, TA request form, office hours, peer coaching. Thank you to all for what you do, and have a great day.